The silence in space was deafening. No distant hum of technology, no bustling chatter of civilizations. The void stretched endlessly, filled with mysteries that had long since been forgotten. The starship Archangel drifted through the void, its hull shimmering under the light of distant stars. The crew aboard had come from the remnants of humanity, long thought extinct. But now, 1,000 years later, they were back, emerging from the shadows of their own past. Lyra stood at the front of the bridge, her gaze fixed on the view ahead. The star system they had entered looked ancient, almost untouched by time. The planets were lifeless, barren, lifeless husks of what might have once been vibrant worlds. The crew of the Archangel knew this was where their ancestors had vanished, swept into obscurity by forces beyond their control. But now, as their ship approached, the galaxy seemed to stir, an awareness they hadn't anticipated. "Why us?" Cale asked, his voice a whisper of disbelief, breaking through the tension. He glanced at Lyra, his eyes searching for answers. "Why now?" Lyra didn't look away from the star system ahead. The weight of history pressed down on her. "Because we never truly disappeared," she replied. "The galaxy forgot us, but we never forgot them." Their journey had begun centuries ago. A catastrophe had consumed the Earth, wiping out almost every trace of humanity. The galaxy believed they were gone. For millennia, alien species flourished, their empires rising and falling, forging new alliances and wars. But the truth was different. A handful of humans had survived, hiding, adapting, waiting. Now, as the Archangel entered orbit around one of the ancient planets, the sensors picked up faint signals, echoes of a past that had once been forbidden. Long-forgotten messages, old broadcasts, and warnings, ones they didn't understand fully yet. The crew knew these were relics from a time when humans stood at the forefront of the cosmos, a time when they had enemies who feared what they could become. "They think we're extinct," Lyra said, more to herself than to the others. "They've spent centuries preparing, forgetting, and thinking they were safe." Cale studied the data on his screen. "But we're here now. That silence they relied on, it's over." The crew was filled with uncertainty, but Lyra remained steadfast. The galaxy they had returned to was no longer a place where humans could hide unnoticed. The legends of the elder gods, ancient beings who had warned their offspring about humanity's recklessness, now felt more real than ever. Humanity's return was no longer a story lost to time, it was a fact. And as they continued to unravel the mysteries of the star system, they knew the stakes had never been higher. The hum of the Archangel's systems was the only sound as Lyra and Cale delved deeper into the ancient planet's mysteries. Signals intercepted earlier now pointed to something extraordinary, a dormant alien artifact hidden beneath the surface. Its energy readings were erratic, fluctuating as if it sensed the human's presence. This wasn't just a discovery, it was an invitation or a warning. The team prepared for descent. Lyra's voice cut through the tension as she addressed the crew. "We don't know what's down there, but it could hold answers to why humanity was erased from the galaxy's memory, and why we're feared. Stay sharp." Cale, suited up and armed with a plasma rifle, smirked. "Sharp as ever. Let's just hope whatever's waiting doesn't bite." The shuttle landed amidst ancient ruins, structures of alien origin stretching toward the sky like skeletal remains. The air was heavy with an unspoken weight, the kind that made even the bravest reconsider their choices. Lyra led the way, her scanner buzzing faintly as it picked up the artifact's signal. The ruins told a story of abandonment, of a civilization that had fled or been extinguished. But the deeper they ventured, the more the evidence suggested something more sinister. "Look at this," Cale said, pointing to carvings etched into a wall. They depicted figures, tall, imposing beings, standing over smaller, human-like shapes. The smaller figures were surrounded by flames, chains, and symbols that looked eerily like warnings. "Subjugation," Lyra whispered. "Or fear." Suddenly, the ground beneath them rumbled. Dust fell from the ceiling as the ruins seemed to awaken. Lights flickered along the walls, illuminating the carvings with an eerie glow. The artifact was no longer dormant, it had activated, its energy now a pulsing rhythm that matched the tremors. Back to the shuttle, now! Lyra ordered, but the exit was no longer visible. The ruins had shifted, trapping them in an unfamiliar maze. As the team tried to find another way out, shadows began to move unnaturally. The walls whispered in a language none of them could understand. Lyra's calm crackled to life, but it wasn't her crew, it was something else. The voice was deep, resonant, and filled with an authority that made the air seem heavier. "Humans," it said, each syllable dripping with disdain. "You were warned. Why have you returned?" Kale raised his weapon, scanning the shadows. "Whoever you are, we're just here to awaken what should remain buried," the voice interrupted, growing louder. "The galaxy paid a price to rid itself of your kind." Lyra stepped forward, defiance in her stance. "We're here to understand. To find the truth. If you fear us so much, maybe it's because you know we're stronger than you ever gave us credit for." The voice laughed, a sound that echoed endlessly. "You think strength is why we fear you? Your existence brings chaos. Your will to survive defies the natural order. And now you've brought that chaos back." Before Lyra could respond, the artifact's energy surged, filling the ruins with a blinding light. When the team's vision cleared, they were no longer in the ruins. They stood in a vast, alien chamber filled with shimmering columns of light and suspended orbs that pulsed like living hearts. At the center was the artifact, a massive crystalline structure that seemed alive. Kale muttered under his breath, "This just keeps getting better." The artifact began to hum, and images appeared in the air around them, scenes from humanity's past. Battles against alien forces, moments of triumph, and the eventual destruction of Earth. But these weren't just memories, they were warnings. The artifact was a repository of knowledge, a record of why humanity had been exiled from the galaxy. Lyra approached it cautiously. "It's showing us the truth." "But why?" The voice returned, softer this time. "Because you cannot change what you are. You were spared extinction once. Now you risk awakening forces that even you cannot control." The artifact's light grew brighter, and the chamber trembled. It was a test, Lyra realized, one that would determine whether humanity's return was a blessing or a curse. The chamber trembled as the artifact's light grew blindingly bright. Lyra shielded her eyes, her heart pounding. Kale, his weapon raised instinctively, scanned the chamber for threats. But the artifact was the threat, or perhaps the key. "It's testing us," Lyra shouted over the deafening hum. "We need to prove we're not what they think we are." Kale's skepticism was palpable. "And how exactly do we do that? Negotiate with a rock?" The voice returned, resonant and commanding. "Your nature has already decided. Chaos follows humans. Survival at any cost. What will you sacrifice this time?" The shimmering columns of light around them began to take form. Alien creatures materialized, spectral, yet terrifyingly real. Each one represented a species humanity had once fought and defeated. They moved with purpose, their spectral weapons glowing with the same energy as the artifact. "Combat simulation," Kale muttered, taking a defensive stance. "Classic alien mind games." Lyra ignored him, stepping closer to the artifact. "You want us to prove we've changed? Then show us the truth, not just your fears." The voice wavered, its tone uncertain for the first time. The spectral beings paused, their weapons lowering. Then the images around the team shifted. Scenes of Earth's destruction, humanity's desperate last stand, and their eventual retreat to the stars played out in vivid detail. Kale's grip on his weapon tightened. "We already know this. What's your point?" The voice replied, softer now. "You believe your suffering absolves you. That it justifies the chaos you bring. But the galaxy does not forgive so easily." Suddenly, one of the spectral beings lunged at Kale. He fired instinctively, the blast passing harmlessly through the apparition. More followed, swarming the team. Lyra ducked and rolled, shouting, "It's testing our instincts. Don't fight, find another way." Kale gritted his teeth, holstering his weapon reluctantly. "Fine. But if they touch me, all bets are off." Lyra focused on the artifact, her mind racing. If it was testing them, then violence wasn't the answer. Humanity's resilience had always been its strength, but their willingness to fight at any cost was what the galaxy feared. They had to show something different. "Kale," she said, her voice steady despite the chaos. "We need to surrender." He stared at her like she'd grown a second head. "You want to give up? To that?" "It's not giving up," she insisted. "It's proving we can choose peace over conflict." Kale hesitated, the spectral beings closing in. Finally, he dropped to his knees, hands raised. "This better work, Lyra." She mirrored his posture, bowing her head. "We're not here to fight," she said aloud. "We're here to learn. To understand." The spectral beings froze, their forms flickering. The artifact's hum quieted, and the voice spoke again. "You choose humility over defiance. A step forward. But is it enough?" The light from the artifact dimmed, and the chamber's energy shifted. A new figure emerged, human in shape but glowing with the same energy as the artifact. It stepped forward, its voice a blend of many. "We are the custodians. We preserve this knowledge, this history, to warn those who came after. Humanity's return disrupts the balance. You must prove you can coexist without bringing destruction." Lyra met the custodian's gaze, determination burning in her eyes. "We can't undo the past. But we can build a future. Show us how." The custodian studied her for a moment, then raised its hand. The artifact pulsed, and a new image appeared, Earth, as it had been before its fall. But this time, it was surrounded by other planets, their people working together in harmony. "This is the future you must strive for," the custodian said. "But it will not be given. It must be earned." The chamber began to dissolve, the team finding themselves back in the ruins. The artifact's light faded, its test complete. Kale exhaled sharply, the tension finally releasing. "Well," he said, standing and brushing himself off. "That was fun. Let's never do it again." Lyra smiled faintly, her eyes on the now dormant artifact. "We've got a lot of work to do. But at least now, we know what we're fighting for." The artifact's light faded completely, leaving Lyra and Kale in the eerie silence of the ruins. But the weight of what had transpired lingered heavily in the air. The custodian's warning echoed in Lyra's mind: coexistence would not come easily, nor would trust be freely given. Kale, ever the pragmatist, broke the silence first. "So we passed their tests, but what now? How do we convince a galaxy to give humanity a second chance?" Lyra looked down at the now dormant artifact. "The custodian showed us what's possible. We have to prove that vision can become reality. But it starts here, with us." Kale sighed, rubbing the back of his neck. "That's a lot of responsibility for two people." "Not just us," Lyra corrected, determination firm in her voice. "This artifact is a key, a message to the galaxy. We need to share what we've learned and find allies willing to listen." Their ship's communicator crackled to life, interrupting the moment. "Lyra, Kale, report back. We've got incoming signals, multiple fleets converging on your location." Kale groaned. "Because, of course, it couldn't end without more complications." Lyra activated her comms. "Understood. Prepare for potential hostiles, but don't engage unless necessary. We're heading back." As they rushed back to their ship, the ruins trembled, ancient mechanisms stirring to life. Lyra glanced over her shoulder to see a beam of light shoot into the sky, a signal visible across the stars. Kale muttered, "That's not going to help us stay under the radar." The light had an immediate effect. By the time they reached orbit, they could see the fleets, armadas of ships, some bearing the insignia of species they recognized, others entirely foreign. And at the center of it all, a Galactic Council flagship loomed, its size and firepower dwarfing the rest. "Great," Kale said, strapping into his seat. "They brought the cavalry." The Council hailed them. Lyra took a deep breath before answering. On the screen, a stern alien with an elongated skull and sharp, silver eyes appeared. "Human representatives," it said, its voice cold but measured. Your actions have disrupted a fragile balance. Explain yourselves. Lyra met the alien's gaze. We found the artifact, she said plainly. It tested us, and we passed. It showed us a future where humanity doesn't bring chaos, but cooperation. We want to build that future. The alien's expression didn't change. Words are easy. Trust is not. Kale cut in. We didn't come here to ask for trust. We came to earn it. You've spent centuries fearing what humanity could do. Now let us show you what we can do, for the galaxy, not against it. The alien considered this, then nodded slightly. The artifact's activation has drawn attention far beyond this system. You will face scrutiny and opposition. But if your intentions are genuine, this is your chance to prove them. The Council fleet didn't fire, nor did it withdraw. Instead, a path was cleared for Lyra and Kale's ship to return to their base, under heavy surveillance. It was a small concession, but it was a start. Back on their home station, they wasted no time. The artifact's data was analyzed, its message broadcast to those willing to listen. Some species, weary of conflict, responded with cautious interest. Others, still scarred by humanity's past, sent threats instead. As weeks turned into months, a fragile coalition began to form. Lyra and Kale worked tirelessly, negotiating, mediating, and demonstrating humanity's commitment to change. The artifact's vision, a galaxy united, not divided, became a rallying cry. But not everyone wanted peace. Rogue factions, driven by old grudges or fear of humanity's resurgence, launched attacks. One such group targeted the station itself, breaching its defenses with a fleet of cloaked ships. Kale led the charge to defend their home, his tactical brilliance turning the tide despite being outnumbered. Lyra, meanwhile, broadcast a plea for aid. To her surprise, several Allied fleets responded, arriving just in time to secure victory. The battle was a turning point. It proved humanity's willingness to fight not for domination, but for survival alongside others. It also showed their allies that humanity could be a force for good when given the chance. In the aftermath, Lyra stood before a gathering of leaders from across the galaxy. The custodian's holographic projection appeared beside her, a silent reminder of the stakes. We can't undo the past, Lyra said, her voice steady and resolute. But we can decide what comes next. Humanity doesn't want to conquer, we want to contribute. Let's build the future together. The room was silent for a moment before one leader, an elder of a reptilian species, stood. The past cannot be forgotten. But perhaps it can be forgiven in time. Let this be the first step. Others murmured in agreement, and the fragile coalition solidified into something more. The custodian's warning had been heeded, its test passed. And though the road ahead would be long and fraught with challenges, humanity had taken its first true steps toward redemption. As Lyra and Kale watched the gathering disperse, Kale smirked. You know, I didn't think we'd make it this far without blowing something up. Lyra chuckled. There's still time. For the first time in centuries, humanity's place in the galaxy wasn't defined by fear or conflict. It was defined by hope.